According to the BBC News, a man drove a van into Muslims who were worshiping at a Muslim welfare house in Finsbury Park. They were gathered there to help an elderly man who had collapsed. And out of the incident, one man died and 10 people were injured in the assault. The driver was a white man, and he was wrestled to the ground by other members of the public, and then he was arrested on the scene by the police. The driver's name was Darren Osborne, 46 years old, and he's been held on suspicion of terrorism. And of course, this immediately goes to the conversation of whether or not we can actually deem it terrorism because of the precedent that has been set by political leaders and media outlets, really categorizing terrorism or really pigeonholing who can be considered a terrorist to be brown Muslims, or more specifically, non-white, non-Christian violence. And so where here in the United States, we're still discussing whether or not we can consider someone like Dylan Roof a terrorist. In the UK, they are already holding him on suspicion of terrorism. Because people at the scene told him that he wanted to kill Muslims. Security Minister Ben Wallace said the suspect was not known, previously known to any of the security services. Prime Minister Theresa May, this is what she had to say. She said, quote, "It was an attack that once again targeted the ordinary and innocent going about their daily lives. This time, British Muslims, as they left a mosque, having broken their fast and prayed together at this sacred time of the year." Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn told the BBC, he stated, "An attack on a mosque, an attack on a synagogue, an attack on a church is actually an attack on all of us." So the Islamic State actually chimed in on this. Online followers of the Islamic State have been pretty quick to point out or to seize on this attack and use it as an example of the hostility towards Muslims in the UK or in the West in general. And that underscores the nature of any violence when you're dealing with an organization like ISIS. Any act of violence that's committed by someone who either directly pledged their allegiance or someone who is just Muslim and they do a random act of violence, ISIS is there ready to take credit for it because it further exacerbates the question or the conversation of the tensions. It further exacerbates the tensions between the West and essentially the rest. And so ISIS is readily excited to take credit for it when it's a Muslim person, whether or not they've actually pledged allegiance to ISIS. In this case, it shows you that ISIS is willing to take credit or at least use this incident to further their goals. They're using this as an example of the hostilities that exist between Muslims and the West. And this is going to become a key component in their propaganda. They have a sophisticated propaganda outlet, to be sure. And so anything like this can be used to further their purposes because they benefit the most from division. So the more hostility that exists between politicians, elected leaders, community leaders, and the Muslim community, the more opportunities ISIS has to capitalize on that. Essentially, the clash of civilizations. And what's problematic about this is the fact that it's being coined as such, not only by ISIS, but also by elected officials in the West and the United States. You'll hear this term, the clash of civilizations. It's a holy war. It's a war between radical Islamic terrorism. It's a war between Christian Judeo values and radical Islamic terrorism or Sharia law. And anything cast like that further exacerbates the problem without question, without There's a 100% connection between this concept of a clashing of civilizations and the ability to radicalize even more people. And so while ISIS is benefiting from this, you also have to understand the role that the West plays in giving ISIS the exact ammunition they need to further radicalize someone. And this Darren Osborne, 46, whatever his frustrations were, he carried out an act of terrorism, which we would not have called it here in the United States, but in the UK, they're going to call it an act of terrorism. But by carrying out that act of terrorism, he has essentially given ISIS exactly what they need to further the divide through the clash of civilizations.